Hello everyone, I wanted to make an introduction before moving on to the video. The channel's interactions are a little low, so I'm asking you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and state your opinion in the comments. Thank you very much in advance. Lily had always found solace in the quiet of her old family home. Nestled at the end of a winding dirt road and surrounded by dense woods, the house had been in her family for generations. When her parents decided to sell it after her grandmother passed away, Lily begged them to let her stay. She wanted to keep the memories alive, to feel her grandmother's presence in every creak of the floorboards and every shadow cast by the flickering candlelight. After a week of moving in, the initial excitement began to wear off. The house was larger than she remembered, each room filled with remnants of a life once lived. Dust motes danced in the sunlight that filtered through the grimy windows, and the air felt thick with unspoken stories. At night, the house creaked and sighed as if it were alive, but Lily took comfort in the familiarity of its sounds. On a particularly stormy evening, while the wind howled outside, she settled into her grandmother's old armchair with a novel. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the lights flickered, but she found herself lost in the pages. As the storm intensified, the wind battered the house, rattling the windows and causing shadows to stretch and dance along the walls. Suddenly, she heard a soft whisper. It was so faint that she dismissed it as the wind. But then, it came again, more distinct, almost a gentle calling. Lily paused, listening intently. Lily ... double quotes, it seemed to say, a voice laced with warmth and familiarity. Her heart raced. It sounded like her grandmother. "Hello," she called out, feeling a chill run down her spine. The only response was the howling wind outside. Shaking her head, she decided it was just her imagination, fueled by the storm. Later that night, as she prepared for bed, she noticed the family portraits hanging in the hallway. They were old and faded, but she could still make out the faces. Her grandmother smiled back at her from one of the photographs, eyes twinkling as if sharing a secret. But just beneath that smile, Lily sensed something else, an unsettling depth that made her shiver. As she settled into bed, the wind continued to rage outside. Wrapped in her grandmother's quilt, she closed her eyes, but sleep eluded her. The whispers returned, more insistent this time. "Lily ... come to me ... She sat up, heart pounding. It felt as if the walls were closing in, the air thick with an unnatural heaviness. Summoning her courage, she threw off the covers and tiptoed down the hallway, following the whispers that seemed to beckon her. In the living room, the candle she had left burning flickered violently, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. She glanced around, half expecting to see her grandmother sitting in her chair, but the room was empty. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a chilling breeze. "Where are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. Lily jumped, heart racing, and rushed toward the sound. The kitchen was dark, and as she flicked on the light, she saw the remnants of a fallen shelf, dishes scattered across the floor. Her breath hitched as she stepped inside, the air thick with an unexplainable dread. She knelt to clean up the mess, but the whispers returned, more frantic now. "Lily, you must listen." The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. "What do you want?" she called out, her voice echoing in the stillness. A cold gust of wind swept through the kitchen, extinguishing the light. She stumbled back, heart racing, and the whispers morphed into urgent pleas. "Help us ... save us ... double quotes." Lily's mind raced. Who needs help? She asked, her voice trembling. But the whispers faded into a haunting silence, leaving her alone in the dark. Frightened but determined, she made her way back to her room. As she lay in bed, she struggled to dismiss the strange occurrences as figments of her imagination. Exhaustion eventually overtook her, and she drifted into an uneasy sleep. The following days were filled with strange happenings. Doors creaked open on their own, lights flickered erratically, and she often caught glimpses of movement out of the corner of her eye. The whispers never ceased. They haunted her waking hours and invaded her dreams. Each night, they grew louder, more desperate. One evening, while searching through her grandmother's old things, Lily found a dusty journal hidden in the back of a closet. Its pages were yellowed with age, filled with her grandmother's delicate handwriting. As she read, her heart sank. The journal spoke of a family curse, a darkness that had settled over the house generations ago, a malevolent spirit that fed on fear and sorrow. Every family member must confront their past, one entry read. Only then can the curse be broken. Lily's hands trembled as she turned the pages, each one revealing more about the dark history of the home. Her grandmother had written about the whispers, the voices that plagued their family, and how each member had met a tragic fate, unable to break free from the spirit's grasp. Determined to confront the entity that tormented her, Lily prepared a small ritual her grandmother had described in the journal. That night, she lit candles around the living room and arranged photos of her family, focusing on the love and joy they once shared. As she sat in the center of the circle, she closed her eyes and called out to the spirit. "I am here," she said, her voice steady. "I want to help you. I want to break this curse." The temperature in the room dropped, and the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of voices. "Help us, double quotes," they cried, overlapping and chaotic. The candles flickered violently, and a figure began to form in the darkness, a shadowy silhouette of a woman with familiar features. It was her grandmother, but her face was twisted in anguish. "Lily, you must understand," she said, her voice layered with sorrow. "The darkness is within us. It feeds on our pain. I'm not afraid." Lily shouted, her voice echoing against the walls. "I want to set you free." The spirit reached out, a desperate plea in her eyes. "You must face the truth. Confront the pain of our past." The room plunged into darkness as the candles snuffed out. Lily felt a sudden weight pressing down on her chest, the air thick with despair. Memories flooded her mind, her family's struggles, the secrets they had buried, the love that had turned to regret. The whispers turned to screams, an overwhelming rush of emotion that threatened to engulf her. But in that moment, something shifted. She took a deep breath and focused on the love that had once filled the house. "I forgive you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I forgive us all." A blinding light burst forth, illuminating the room. The whispers faded into soft murmurs, and the weight on her chest lifted. The figure of her grandmother smiled gently, and the anguish in her eyes began to fade. "Thank you, my dear. You have broken the cycle." As the light enveloped her, the house sighed, a sense of peace settling over the walls. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, leaving only the gentle sound of the wind outside. Lily awoke the next morning in her bed, sunlight streaming through the window. The house felt different, lighter, as if it had finally exhaled. She ventured downstairs, heart racing with hope. The living room was unchanged, yet everything felt renewed. The whispers had quieted, replaced by an almost joyous silence. She picked up her grandmother's journal, now resting peacefully on the coffee table, and smiled. As she opened it, a single page fluttered free, revealing a simple message: "Love conquers all." From that day forward, Lily filled the house with laughter and light. She invited friends and family to share in its warmth, transforming the once lonely space into a vibrant home. And though the whispers had ceased, she would often feel her grandmother's presence comforting and guiding her, reminding her that love would always endure, even in the darkest of times. After a long day at work, Emma arrived home to her quaint, old house on Maplewood Lane. The fading sunlight cast long shadows through the trees that surrounded her property, and the air was thick with the scent of impending rain. She had inherited the house from her late grandmother, and while it was filled with memories, it also had an unsettling presence that Emma couldn't quite shake off. As she stepped inside, the familiar creaks of the wooden floorboards echoed through the hall. She dropped her keys on the kitchen counter, the sound echoing in the silence of the empty house. A chill ran down her spine, but she brushed it off. The first few weeks had been difficult. She often felt as though she was being watched, but she was determined to make the house her own. That evening, a storm rolled in, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the wind rattled the windows. Emma settled onto the couch with a cup of tea, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. She turned on her favorite series, letting the familiar characters drown out the storm outside. As the rain pelted against the windows, Emma felt a strange sense of comfort wash over her. But that comfort was short-lived. A loud bang echoed from upstairs. Emma froze, her heart racing. She had been alone all day. Taking a deep breath, she convinced herself it was just the house settling. Moments later, she heard it again, a soft thud, then silence. Curiosity overpowered her fear, and she slowly climbed the staircase, each step creaking beneath her weight. The second floor was dark, the shadows clinging to the corners of the hallway. Emma flicked on the light, and the bulb flickered ominously before illuminating the corridor. The first two doors were closed, but the third, her grandmother's old study, was slightly ajar. The room had always felt peculiar. It was filled with books and trinkets, but the air inside felt heavier, like it was holding secrets. Taking a hesitant step forward, Emma pushed the door open. Nothing seemed out of place, but the air felt electric, charged with an unexplainable tension. She stood there for a moment, scanning the room, then turned to leave. Just as she did, she heard a whisper, soft yet clear. "Emma." She spun around, heart racing. "Who's there?" she called, her voice wavering. Silence enveloped her, and the shadows danced eerily around the room. Mustering her courage, she stepped back and closed the door, convinced her mind was playing tricks on her. The next few days were filled with the same unsettling occurrences. Emma would hear whispers in the night, faint and disembodied, as if someone were calling her name. Sometimes she'd catch a glimpse of a shadow in the corner of her eye, only to turn and find nothing there. Yet, every morning, the house felt a little more oppressive. One night, she decided to research the history of Maplewood Lane. She sat in her grandmother's study, surrounded by books that seemed to breathe secrets. As she flipped through pages, she stumbled upon a journal tucked between two dusty volumes. It belonged to her grandmother, filled with handwritten notes and sketches. The entries spoke of the house's past, how it was built on land once owned by a reclusive family who had vanished without a trace. Strange occurrences had plagued the area for decades, from unexplained noises to sightings of ghostly figures. Emma felt a chill creep down her spine as she read the final entry, dated just weeks before her grandmother's death. "Something watches from the shadows. I fear for Emma. She must be careful." A cold sweat broke out on Emma's brow. Had her grandmother sensed something was wrong? She glanced around the room, suddenly feeling very small in the overwhelming silence. Determined to confront whatever was haunting her, she closed the journal and resolved to face the shadows. That night, as the storm returned, Emma gathered her courage and sat in the study with the lights dimmed. The thunder rolled outside, and the wind howled through the trees. She placed her grandmother's journal on her lap and spoke into the darkness. "If you're here, I want to understand. What do you want?" Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Just as she was about to give up, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. The darkness thickened, and she felt a presence beside her. The whispers returned, swirling around her, growing louder and more frantic. "Help us, find us." Emma's heart raced as she tried to make sense of the chaos. "Who are you? What do you need?" Suddenly, the air turned frigid, and a figure began to materialize in the corner of the room. It was a woman, her features blurred and indistinct, but Emma felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow radiating from her. "You must help us, before it's too late." Fear coursed through Emma, but beneath it was a spark of compassion. "How? What can I do?" The figure pointed toward the old trunk in the corner of the room. Emma's gaze followed, her heart pounding. "Open it." The voice echoed, filled with anguish. With shaking hands, she approached the trunk. It was covered in dust, and the lock had rusted over the years. But the moment she touched it, the trunk sprang open as if it had been waiting for her. Inside, she found a collection of old photographs, letters, and a delicate locket. As she riffled through the items, she realized they were remnants of the family that had once lived there, the family who had vanished. The photographs showed them smiling, vibrant, but as she continued to sift through the letters, the tone shifted. They spoke of fear, of something dark lurking in the woods surrounding the house. The last letter, addressed to her grandmother, was a frantic plea for help. "They're trapped," Emma whispered, feeling a sense of dread settle in her stomach. The shadows seemed to pulse around her, and the whispers grew louder, more desperate. "You must free us." Heart racing, Emma understood. The darkness that had plagued the family had seeped into the house, feeding off their fear and sorrow. She needed to confront this malevolent force. Clutching the locket, she felt a sudden rush of determination. "Leave them alone. she shouted, her voice echoing through the room. "You will not take me or anyone else." The shadows recoiled, swirling around her as if enraged. The figure of the woman stepped closer, her face now clearer, filled with pain but also gratitude. "Break the cycle, find the truth." Emma's mind raced as she realized the truth lay beyond the walls of the house. She needed to find the woods, the source of the darkness that had consumed the family. Gathering her courage, she left the house, the rain pouring down around her. The storm illuminated the path as she stepped into the forest behind her home. Every crack of thunder made her heart race, but she pressed on, guided by the whispers that now seemed to direct her. As she ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere thickened, and a sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, and the shadows twisted unnaturally. She followed a narrow path until she stumbled upon a clearing where the ground seemed scorched, the earth dark and barren. In the center stood a massive, gnarled tree, its roots twisted like fingers clawing at the ground. The whispers intensified, filling her ears with urgency. Here is where it happened." Emma approached the tree, her heart pounding. As she placed her hand on the rough bark, images flooded her mind. Screams, darkness, the faces of the family twisted in fear. She could feel the malevolence radiating from the tree, feeding off the anguish of those who had been lost. "Leave them in peace," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "I will not let you take anyone else." With all her strength, she focused on the love and warmth that had once filled her grandmother's home. She thought of the laughter, the memories, the bonds that transcended even death. Channeling that energy, she shouted into the night, "You have no power here." The ground shook, and the wind howled as a blinding light erupted from her hand, enveloping the tree. The shadows writhed and screamed, and Emma felt a surge of energy course through her. The figure of the woman appeared beside her, her expression serene. "Thank you. You are breaking the cycle." With a final surge of power, Emma unleashed a wave of light that swept through the clearing. The darkness shattered like glass, and with it, the whispers faded into silence. As the light dimmed, Emma found herself alone in the clearing, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The tree stood tall, now vibrant and alive. The echoes of anguish had vanished, replaced by a profound peace. Returning home, Emma felt transformed. The house no longer felt like a prison, it was a sanctuary. The shadows were gone, and the whispers had ceased. She could almost hear her grandmother's laughter in the wind. Days turned into weeks, and Emma filled the house with life. Friends visited, laughter echoed through the halls, and the warmth of love enveloped her. The darkness that had once plagued Maplewood Lane had been vanquished, and in its place, she found a renewed sense of purpose. Though the past would always linger, she embraced the memories, knowing that love would forever conquer the shadows. Laura lived alone in a small, creaky house on the outskirts of town. One rainy evening, while scrolling through her phone, she heard a faint knock at the door. Confused, she glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight. Who could it be? Ignoring the urge to check, she returned to her screen. The knock came again, louder this time. A shiver ran down her spine, but she convinced herself it was just the wind. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Let me in." Heart racing, she replied. "Who is this?" "Open the door." "Laura, it's me." Panic surged as she realized the voice in the message sounded just like her late mother's. Her mother had died years ago. She felt a mix of fear and longing. "This isn't funny," she typed back. The response was immediate. "I'm so cold out here. Please let me in." Fighting against her fear, she stood up and moved toward the door. As she reached for the handle, a sudden chill swept through the house. Her breath fogged in the air. "Laura." The voice called again, softer this time, almost pleading. She hesitated, torn between disbelief and the ache of loss. Then, with trembling hands, she opened the door. The darkness outside swallowed her, and there was no one there. Just a gust of wind. Confused, she stepped outside, calling, "Mom?" But only silence answered. As she turned to go back inside, the door slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked, and she felt a presence behind her. "Why did you let me out?" a voice whispered in her ear. Alright everyone, that brings us to the end of our story. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And if you have similar stories you'd like to share with us, feel free to reach out. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.